So what happens when a democracy just runs out of opposition? And I'm not talking about some hypothetical riddle. It's a situation playing out right now in the Indian state of Meghalaya. We're going to break down a really fascinating political event that's putting the whole idea of government accountability to the test.
This question you see on the screen, it's not just some academic exercise. It's the central puzzle we really need to dig into. We're going to unpack what happens when those vital checks and balances that make a democracy work just start to, well, disappear. And we're using a real-world story that just went down in Meghalaya to do it.
And this really gets to the heart of it all. What are the consequences for how a state is governed, for the people who live there, and for the whole democratic process itself when one side of the political equation just vanishes?
Okay, to really get a grip on the impact here, we've got to look at exactly how this all happened. It's a story that unfolds really, really fast, and it's best told with a few key numbers.
It all starts with this number, 5. So after the 2023 state election, the Indian National Congress, one of the biggest political parties in the whole country, they held just 5 seats in Meghalaya's assembly. Now, that's not a huge number, but hey, it was a foothold. It was a presence.
And this is where things get wild. This timeline shows just how quickly that foothold completely crumbled. I mean, for over 50 years, since the state was even formed, the Congress Party was always there. But then, in just a couple of years, 4 of those 5 representatives jumped ship to the ruling coalition. And that last one? Well, in July 2025, he left too.
Which brings us to this, a big, fat zero. For the first time since 1972, the Congress Party has 0 representation in the state assembly. Gone. It's basically a political extinction event.
So, with the main national opposition party completely out of the picture, who's actually holding the power now? Let's break down the new political landscape this whole thing has created.
Wow. Okay, this chart pretty much tells the whole story, doesn't it? Out of 60 total seats, the ruling coalition now has over 50 of them. That is a massive majority. And what's left of the opposition? It's tiny. And it's split between smaller regional parties that can't really form a united front, which makes them way less effective.
Yeah. As you can probably guess, this whole thing was incredibly controversial. The Congress Party did not hold back. They basically accused the ruling coalition of buying off their politicians. This quote, traded their loyalty for silver coins. Man, that's some strong language. It really captures that feeling that the voters had been totally betrayed.
So let's move past the political drama for a second. What does this actually mean for the people of Meghalaya on a day-to-day basis? This is where we see the real-world impact, what one source has called a governance catastrophe.
Just look at the difference here. It's like night and day. Before, even with the small opposition, you had a system. You had organized, tough questioning of the government. You had a way to take local problems and get them national attention. Without that, all of it just evaporates. You're left with this accountability vacuum. And that vacuum has very real consequences. Think about it. The government can now operate for years with almost no fear of being challenged. They literally can't lose a vote. No major new law can be seriously debated or blocked. It also just normalizes this idea that politicians can switch sides whenever they want, which kind of makes your vote feel less powerful. The bottom line is, there is no real threat to them until the next election, and that's still years away. Okay, so you might be thinking, why does all this political drama in one Indian state matter to the rest of us? Well, here's why it's so important. What happened in Meghalaya isn't just a local story. It's a textbook example of a much bigger trend that's a real threat to democracies all over. Political scientists actually have a term for this kind of thing. They call it an elected autocracy. The idea is simple. A government gets into power through a totally legitimate election, but then, once they're in charge, they start taking apart all the mechanisms that are supposed to keep them in check. And a strong opposition? That's one of the biggest and most important checks of all. So you're probably asking, wait a minute, isn't this sort of thing illegal? And you'd be right to ask. India does have something called an anti-defection law to prevent exactly this. But, and this is a big but, there's a loophole. If 2/3 of a party's legislators all agree to merge with another party, the law says it's okay. So a rule that was made for parties to formally join together can be twisted to let a whole bunch of politicians jump ship with no legal blowback. And as you can see from this table, Meghalaya is definitely not an isolated case. We're seeing these same patterns of extreme one-party dominance in other states too. Look at Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. The ruling parties there control almost every single seat. That is an insane level of dominance.
And it's no surprise that these are also places where people are raising concerns about unchecked government power.
Which brings us right back to the central question we started with. When you see power get this concentrated on one side, are you still looking at a functional democracy? Or is it something else? I think the key thing to take away from all this is that the health of a democracy isn't just about who wins an election. Maybe, just maybe, it's even more about the power and the presence of those who don't. Because in the end, a strong, vocal opposition is what keeps everyone in power accountable to all of us.